All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where we're doing our first episode actually on the Big 12 team previews. We're diving into Kansas. If you are enjoying our content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate all the support we've gotten so far. But we're going to dive right into it. Start with Marcus. What are the offensive strengths of the Kansas Jayhawks that you see in this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think the biggest strength is just I think they have some ceiling guys, in particular Darryn Peterson, with their youth, right? I think this team, unusual from the last few years anyway, Kansas has had a lot of experienced guys on their team, and now kind of back to maybe like mid-2010s Bill Self teams where they had a bunch of young guys. And like Darryn Peterson is most certainly going to be a strength. For anyone that has watched his tape and doesn't think he's going to be any good is crazy, because I think he's going to be able to do it at all three levels. I think he's going to be able to get out and transition. So he's going to be certainly a strength of this offense. I think they've got some other freshmen that have some like high ceiling abilities, like Samus Calderon, Cole Rosario. I think both a couple 4-stars that are interesting. I think they can both knock shots down. They're both good athletes. So I think it could play into Bill Self's hands by the time the end of the season comes around, because I think this offense has some versatility, unlike, maybe in other years. But I think it just may take a little bit of time to get there with this particular group because of the lack of experience. And then I think on the offensive glass, they could be solid as well with Flory Badunga, and then a couple of freshmen, Paul Mbaya, 7-footer, and then another freshman in Bryson Tiller at 6'11". So I think it's just a very young offense, but I think there is quite a bit of upside in this group, at least by the time the end of the season comes around.
Cody, anything you want to add from a strength perspective? And then I'll have you dive right into weaknesses with the Jayhawks.
Yeah, I would agree. There's some pretty high upside pieces on this team with Darryn Peterson and some guys down the board. Like you mentioned, Cole Rosario. I think he's going to be able to slide in as a shooter on this team, which they don't have like fantastic shooting, but there are some depth pieces that can provide a spark. It just kind of depends on what kind of roles that they're going to play. But I also think they're going to have a really good transition attack. And, they don't have a true point guard really on this roster that, is known to be like at least a solid point guard at the Big 12 level right now. And I think this is a roster that's kind of built to run. KU teams, like they've typically been pretty elite in this area, but they've got away from it the last couple of years with like a less athletic group. It's just tough to get out and run when your best player is Hunter Dickinson, who's a more like, post up oriented option in the half court, like just a post hub in general. And there's 4 guys in the projected starting lineup that can just grab a rebound and go. In Darryn Peterson, Melvin Council, Jaden Dawson, and Trey White. I mean, I'm not completely sure what the starting lineup is going to look like, but those are like just some veteran pieces in there as well that I think might start at least to start the season. And then the guys in the front court as well can really add to the transition attack in Flory Badunga and a guy like Paul Mbaya. They get down the floor extremely well. And then Bryson Tiller at the 4, he can play the 4 or the 5. He's a super mobile guy at 6'10" with some length. So there's a lot of options on this team to be able to get out and run. But just to dive into weaknesses a little bit, I think they could run into some turnover issues with, the lack of a point guard. And it wouldn't surprise. I think Darryn Peterson operates as the primary guard. He's going to be making a lot of decisions with the ball in his hands, but I think he could run into some trouble with too much on-ball responsibility, and a lack of spacing could hurt the half-court, which, it'll force some guys to, force drives and passes that Bill Self doesn't necessarily want these guys to make. And the front court group isn't the greatest with the ball in their hands either. If Darryn Peterson gets blitzed in a ball screen, which is going to happen a ton this season, I think he's already like a proven talent. He's going to be probably the he has the highest ceiling in the entire country as a scorer. So they're going to try to get the ball out of his hands. And I don't really trust the front court group to make decisions in short roll. That's where Hunter Dickinson was so good. And he, it kind of reminds me of like when they played Houston, DeJuan Harris and Hunter Dickinson pick and roll pairing in short roll. They were able to carve up through that Houston defense at times, particularly, at Fog Allen, but they don't really have that piece this season with Badunga and Mbia. That's just not their games. They're more play finishers than, any sort of like, they don't really have a ton of initiation. The playmaking's not really there. So I think turnovers are a potential issue. Like the spacing isn't elite. I do think they have some guys again, but I do think in general, they could just run into some issues in the half court if Darryn Peterson isn't an elite level playmaker, which I do think that's in the realm of possibility. I think he can operate as a point guard while still being able to average 18 or 19 points a game, but it is a lot to ask for a freshman.
Marcus, anything you want to add?
Just to make a couple quick points. I think like Cody brings a good point. I think the shooting is a little bit uncertain, the floor spacing right now, at least with the guys who are going to start the season in the lineup. But I think a guy like Calderon, Rosario, as the season goes on, we could see more of them because I do think they have a little bit higher upside as shooters compared to some of those other guys that we've now seen for 3 or 4 years and haven't really shown much more than like 30% from behind the arc. So that, and then I think this year is going to be interesting for them to not really have like a post hub, right? Like to your point, Cody, about the short roll decision maker, like it's not like they're really going to be going to Badunga or either freshman for that matter in the post and Bia or Tiller, which I think is going to be kind of an unfortunate thing for this team, at least early on. Bill Self, obviously the last couple of years has been able to just dump it into Dickinson when they need something and trust him to make a play. And now doesn't really have that because Badunga, while I do expect some growth from him, I'm not really sure he's there yet in terms of a creator for himself. He's going to have to primarily rely on lobs and offensive rebounding, I think. So I am a little bit concerned in that area as well.
All right, let's flip to the other side of the ball. Cody, we're going to send it back over to you and talk some defensive strengths now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a fantastic defense next year for it's worth. I think there's a real chance they can finish in the top 5 in adjusted defense. And I think their main strength is just their athleticism and their depth of athleticism. I mean, it's pretty hard to identify a weak link on this roster. Like maybe it's Cole Rosario, but I don't really have a ton of info on him as a defender at this point in time. Like his just athleticism just didn't really pop on the film. But you have guys like Melvin Council is an elite level on-ball defender. Not a lot of people talk about Darryn Peterson as a defender. He's elite on this side of the ball as well. And Jaden Dawson is a good defender. Trey White's been solid throughout his career. He's not like he's a switchable guy at the very least, can guard like 2 through 4. And then you have the duo of Flory Badunga and Paul Mbia, who they're probably not going to split minutes. I think Badunga probably gets 25, 26, and Mbia is going to get the other 15. But that's an elite rim protection duo for all 40 minutes. And then just the depth pieces on this roster, like Marco Jackson and Jamari McDowell. And you have guys like Bryson Tiller. Like he could very well end up starting at the 4, but he's going to be able to give this team some lineup optionality. And like Simas Calderon, I think was a solid defender when I watched the film a bit. And yeah, overall, I just think this team has a lot more upside in many areas. I think they can force some more turnovers with the athleticism. They can play a little bit more aggressively in pick and roll. Like they weren't able to do that with Hunter Dickinson. It was mostly just a base drop coverage, but now you have Flory Badunga and Paul Mbia, who are elite athletes at the 5 and elite recovery defenders. And, you add in those other athletes across the board and, you can have a really good first shot defense and you can have a team that can disrupt you a bit and enforce some turnovers, which Bill Self teams have done in the past. It hasn't been, his MO of forcing turnovers, but I think they can just do it naturally as well. So I do think really good defense across the board.
Marcus, anything you want to add? And then I'll have you talk a little bit about weaknesses on the defensive side.
Yeah, I really agree. I think this defense is going to be really good. I think it's got the rim protection. It's got the perimeter group. So I think Cody's definitely right in this with this defense. I think they should be good on the glass as well with that front court group. I think they should be versatile, be able to switch a bunch of different stuff, especially like a guy like Tiller, like you mentioned. He's going to play the 4 most likely. And at 6'10", 6'11", 240, he's a really mobile guy, kind of moves like a guard in some ways. So his ability, I think, to be able to kind of switch on to stuff and use his length. And like you said, I think a strength of this team will be their transition attack on the offensive end. So I think it's really going to play into their hands, especially early in the season where they may be playing some of those older guys a bit more and the floor spacing in the half court isn't as good. I think their defense could be a real benefit to them. But yeah, as for weaknesses, I'm a little bit concerned. Like Badunga hasn't really played serious minutes yet, right? Last year, 16 minutes a game, and per 40 minutes, he averaged 5.5 fouls. So I think that's like my main concern is like, can he be more disciplined? And then, alongside him, a freshman coming in Mbia. So I think just the discipline of the front court, being a couple of guys that are shot blockers and young guys in this league that haven't played a lot of basketball in Badunga and not at all in Mbia. I think that is a little bit of a worry. If Badunga can't figure that out, then the front court could be a bit of a problem.
Anything to add for weaknesses, Cody?
Yeah, I had that note marked down, potential foul trouble concerns, but I do think having, Paul Mbia right behind Flory Badunga is going to, help free him up at the very least. If he's only able to play 20 minutes a game because of the foul trouble, I still think this can be an elite level defense with Mbia playing the 5 for 20 minutes a game as well. They can also play some small ball while still having rim protection with Bryson Tiller. And, like if Badunga only plays 20 minutes a game, he's going to have a high level impact for those 20 minutes. He had the top defensive box plus minus on this Kansas roster last year with a 5.4. I don't think anybody else even had a 4 defensive box plus minus. Shaq Moore only played 20 minutes a game, but or 20% of the minutes. But Badunga, yeah, he's going to be fantastic, a fantastic impact. I said maybe defensive rebounding would be a concern, like just relative to, where the rest of this defense is at. I think that's the one area that would be a bit lacking. I mean, Badunga was a solid rebounder and Mbia should be solid as well, but I just don't really think they get a ton of help from the guard spot. And there's a possibility that they finish outside of like the top 75 or 80 in defensive rebound rate, maybe outside the top 100, but that's not going to be a concern when they're able to turn teams over and, defend at the rim and on the perimeter. They're going to be one of the best field goal percentage defenses in the country. So it's not a major concern for me.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about, the players actually. Who's the MVP? Who's the X factor for the Jayhawks? Marcus, we're going to flip it over to you.
I went with the same guy here. MVP and X factor, Darryn Peterson. I think he's going to be so important to this team, like we've talked about on both ends of the floor. But they're going to put the ball in his hands a lot where they don't have a true point guard. And they're going to ask a lot of him very, very early on. From night one, it's going to be like, all right, Darryn, can you give us 20 and also chip in, 5 or 6 rebounds and, 4 assists, 5 assists. And I think like there's going to be a learning curve for him, which is why I do make him the X factor, because it's how quickly can he pick that up? How quickly can he adjust to the physicality of the college game, the different ways that teams are going to defend him, and on the fly as well? How quickly can he adapt in the middle of a play when he gets blitzed on a ball screen? or they ice it and force him back to his left, or just different scenarios that he hasn't probably seen at as much at the high school level, or at least not at the level that a team like Houston is capable of doing. So I think that's why he's the X factor and the MVP, because he's going to be their best player and he's going to be one of the best players in the Big 12. But how quickly he becomes that guy is what makes him the X factor to me.
Cody, did you go with Peterson as well, or another route?
I did. I went the same exact route. He's my MVP and X factor. Don't really have much to add. He's going to be one of the best players in the country from night one, but he's also arguably going to be the most important player to his team in the entire country, mostly just because of that learning curve. And, can he adapt to, making plays for others right away? It's going to be super important. But yeah, I have nothing else to add. He nailed it on the head.
Cody, we'll send it back to you and hear about a ceiling and a floor for the Kansas Jayhawks this season.
Yeah, my ceiling was they can finish top 2 in this league, and they can be a 2 or a 3 seed, just because I think the defense can be that great. I do think it's a top 3 defense in the entire country. The floor would be like 5th, maybe 6th in the Big 12, and then like a 7 seed. So I mean, I think their floor is where they finished last season, which might be a bit of a bold take, because that Kansas team was supposed to be really, really good last year. They obviously underperformed, but I think the defensive side of the ball being so good is going to give this team such a high floor. So ultimately, I think they're a surefire tournament team, and I think they're going to be a really tough team to beat it night in and night out.
Do you have a bowl prediction for this Jayhawk team?
Oh, my bowl prediction, I've mentioned it a few times. I think they're a top 3 defense in the country, and yeah, I feel pretty good about that. And like I was just thinking about it, I think 3 of the top 4 defenses in the entire country are in the Big 12. Houston, Kansas, and Iowa State. But I'm willing to say Kansas is right up there on that level of Iowa State and Houston.
Marcus, ceiling, floor, do you share the same thoughts as Cody, or
pretty much? I said ceiling, they could finish first in this league. I don't know. It's a pretty small percentage, I would say, just like Houston is really good. But I do think there's a world where this team's good enough to do it. And then floor, I said 5th in the league. I think like there are a bunch of really good teams in this league that at the top, it could just come down to health and, who ends up coming along a little bit better in conference play with some of these younger guys. So they could finish there, but I think with Bill Self at the helm and, a group with upside like this, they should be just fine.
And what's your bowl prediction, Marcus, before we wrap things up?
I don't know how bold. I said they finish 3rd in the Big 12 and make a run to the Elite 8.
Okay. I like it. All right, we're going to wrap things up here. As always, thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.